The rain began just as you were making a cup of hot cocoa, not a downpour, no. This was the kind of rain that came softly, scattered and deliberate, like someone slowly plucking strings on a tin roof harp. The dim glow from the street lamp outside filtered through the old fabric curtains, casting trembling halos on the wooden floor. The small cabin in the forest, where you'd retired to live in quiet after leaving the force, was so silent now you could hear the firewood crackling in the hearth. You former state police officer from Georgia had once been used to sirens, to the thud of boots crashing through doors, to the raw, choking sobs of strangers. Now, your world was birdsong, the hoot of an owl at night, and the low whispers of pine trees swaying in the mountain wind. So when you heard a soft scratching at the door 3 taps, then silence, you thought you imagined it, but then it came. Again, for taps this time. Slow, measured. Not the wind. You opened the door. Cold air slapped your face like a wet hand, and then you saw it, a dog small, dark gray, soaked to the bone, sat on the porch. It didn't bark. It didn't whimper. It just stared at you, not pleading, not frightened, just still, silent, and urgent. You squinted at its front leg there.
Us.
Faintly visible beneath the mountain mud, a streak of blood, the leg curled ever. So slightly, like it was hiding something. But it was the eyes that stopped you from shutting the door. Nobody kept dogs around here, especially not dogs like this. You hesitated, partly from surprise, partly because something about the moment didn't feel ordinary, and then it whimpered. A low, long sound from deep in its throat, not loud but unmistakably a request. You sighed, not from annoyance, but because you already knew you couldn't turn it away. You grabbed the old towel hanging by the door, stepped out onto the porch, and knelt down. It didn't back away. It didn't leap forward. It simply dipped. Its head, when your hand reached its freezing, matted fur, and as you looked closer into those eyes, you realized they didn't just plead. They remembered, as if it knew you, as if it had come specifically for you. Another gust of wind swept past, carrying the scent of pine resin and wet forest rot. You stood up. Come in, you said. If you came all the way through this rain, I figure there's a reason. It didn't need a second invitation. Quietly it stepped inside, leaving a trail of wet paw prints on the wooden floor, a strange question in your chest. Where have I seen those eyes before? The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. You woke to pale sunlight bleeding through the cabin's small window. By the fireplace, the strange dog lay curled up, breathing evenly. The old blanket you'd draped over it in the night had slipped to the side, but it looked like it had known hardship long before it ever reached your porch. You were about to toss it a few crumbs left in the kitchen when it suddenly stirred. Not in panic, not eager. It rose like a soldier waking to a call only it could hear, ears pricked, eyes locked on the door. Then, all at once, it ran to its scratching, pawing, turning to look at you as if to say, "Come with me." You chuckled. "Where are we going now, huh, buddy?" Then you sighed, pulling on your thick coat and lacing up your boots. You had no plans today. More importantly, something in your gut said it needed you. The narrow trail behind your cabin led deep into the woods. You'd never gone more than 3 miles in, afraid of landslides. But today, you pushed past the 4th ridge, crossed a fallen oak. Following the wet prints of the dog who had become your guide, then it stopped, abruptly, by a thick, tangled bush, and now you understood why? Another dog, a female, probably was caught in an old steel trap. It's the kind meant for bears or wolves, a relic of crueler decades. Blood seeped from her hind leg, darkening the moss beneath her. Her eyes were shut, her breath shallow. You froze, fingers tightening around the multi-tool in your coat. Who the hell sets a trap like this out here? The gray dog looked back at you. No bark. Just that gaze again, this time a command. Help her. You approached carefully. The trap was rusted, but still strong enough to snap bone. You wedged your knife between the jaws, prying with quiet words, maybe to calm the dog, maybe to calm yourself. Finally, the trap sprang open with a brittle crack. The injured dog flinched but didn't fight. You wrapped your coat around the leg, lifted her gently, heavier than she looked. But she didn't resist. There was something human in that. Stillness, as if she knew you meant no harm. Both dogs followed. You back. This time, the gray one didn't lead. He walked beside you, occasionally glancing over you. Okay? You smiled. Tired but calm. At the cabin, you laid the injured dog Molly. You'd soon call her on an old rug, clean the blood, wrap the wound. The gray one duck sat beside her, watching every move. You grading me now? You joked. No reply. Just his head tilting, eyes glinting in the freeze licher, and for the first time in years, you felt it. You'd done something good. Not for glory, not for pay, just because someone needed help, and in Duke's eyes, you saw more than gratitude. You saw a promise quiet, but deep as the forest. From that day on, your small wooden cabin was no longer alone. Duke and Molly never quite moved in, but they were always there. In the mornings, curled up together on the porch. When you went to shop, would or fetch water. Duke followed silently, always a few steps behind like a quiet sentinel. Molly was weaker, still limping, but every day her eyes grew brighter, like a lantern being slowly refilled. Once you dropped a leather glove by the stream, you didn't think much of it. Tit wasn't that cold yet. But the next morning, there it was, dry, clean. Sitting on your porch, you looked at Duke. He tilted his head. You swear he raised an eyebrow. Thanks, you muttered, scratching his head. Another time, you were struggling to light the fire. Your lighter had gotten wet. Just as you were about to give up, Molly dragged in a bundle of dry sticks neat. Almost like someone had tied them. She dropped them at your feet and waited. You shook your head, laughing. You two aren't dogs, are you? You're people in disguise? They didn't answer, just the fire popping, just the quiet silhouettes. By the hearth, day by day, you got used to their presence. No leashes, no collars. But something tied you together, something older than memory then. One morning you opened the door and they were gone. No Duke, no Molly, no paw prints on the fresh snow. Just a bare porch. A cold breeze rustling the pine branches overhead, like whispering ghosts. You stood there for a long time. Just weeks ago, you couldn't even remember the last person you missed. Now, the house felt too quiet, too large. Silence sat on your shoulders like fog. You didn't cry years as a cop had taken that habit. But as you turned back into the house, you noticed something, a small pine branch, placed gently on the step, fresh green, not weathered, as if it had been laid there just minutes ago. You picked it up, no message, no note, just a branch. But you understood. Some goodbyes don't need words, and maybe, just maybe, an act of kindness, if deep enough, will leave footprints in your heart, no matter how many winters pass. Snowfall deepens, and then silence. In the days that followed, the snow fell heavier. The local radio warned of a record-breaking cold front approaching the northern mountains. You stacked firewood, stocked the pantry, and tested the old generator. Winter ritual that had become second nature since you left the city. But this time, you did it in silence. No watchful eyes followed your every movement as you carried logs inside. No soft footsteps circled the yard at dawn. And no familiar silhouettes lay curled together on the doorstep like two silent, breathing logs. You called out several times along the mountain ridge, but the forest stayed, the forest answering only with the echo of your own voice. Cold and hollow, you began to wonder if Duke and Molly were just passing travelers, that perhaps the bond you felt was no more than a single chapter in a much longer tale, like passengers sharing one stop before continuing on their separate ways. But then, one snowy afternoon, while clearing the trail leading up to your sunset, perched behind the cabin, something strange happened. You found something lying in the pristine snow. Your old lighter, the brass one worn smooth with time. The police insignia all but faded. You thought you'd lost it back in autumn. No footprints. Nearby, no signs of anyone except for you. And them, you crouched, picked it up. Your heart stirred. Something whispered inside, not a voice, but a knowing. A knock on the door of instinct. That night you didn't turn on the lights. Sat in the dark, in front of the fireplace, the pine branch, and lighter laid out in front. Of you? You didn't cry, but you whispered, if something's wrong, if you need help, come back. You weren't expecting an answer, you just needed to say it. And 2 days later, when the snowstorm came in full fury, blanketing the mountains, in white you disappeared. Not the kind of disappearance they write thrillers about. You just didn't come home. Your old truck was found abandoned on the narrow trail leading toward the frozen lake. Doors unlocked, headlights still on. Tire tracks vanishing beneath snow. Your house was cold, empty. No one knew where you'd gone, just one set of footprints led away from the vehicle, and then nothing, as if you'd stepped into a place where snow no longer remembered. Human feet, as if you'd vanished into your own unfinished story. A chapter whose prologue was written in the eyes of a dog on a rainy night. You don't quite recall the exact moment things went wrong. You just meant to collect ice samples from the lake, a quiet winter ritual, your own little ceremony. But the snow was deeper than expected, the sky a leaden gray. The wind howled through the forest like a language no one had spoken in centuries. You made your way along the slope, past pine, limbs bowed heavy with snow. Everything was fine until your boot struck a slick rock. No scream, just a sudden slip. Sky spinning, you hit the ground. Hard, a sharp, unnatural crack knot from the snow. But from you, maybe your knee, maybe your ankle, you weren't sure. But the pain was blinding. You tried to stand. Your right leg buckled, ice cold, locked, burning like needles driven in all at once. You crawled, few feet before collapsing again, this time into a shallow hollow of stone near the slope's edge. Your body curled against the cold. Breath. Slowing, no one knew where you were. No messages left. No warnings. No one left to tell anymore. You pulled out your phone. No signal. Barely any battery left. You lay there, staring up through the snowy treetops. The cold seeped into bone, into memory. You thought of everything, your years as an officer, the arrests, the near-death scrapes, but never had you felt so utterly alone. Then something strange. A sound. Footsteps? No, it couldn't be. No one hiked in weather like this. But then, a bark, distant, sharp. You opened your eyes, unsure if it was R'hllor or your mind clinging to something, and then a blur of gray behind the trees. Hey dog, it was him, Duke. You wanted to believe it was a hallucination, but then he was closer. Eyes wide with panic urgency. He barked again then. Ran a short distance ahead, stopped, turned back. Barked again. You couldn't speak, but your eyes met his. Like they had that first night in the rain. This time he wasn't alone. Behind Duke came 4 or 5, maybe 7 dogs. All shapes, all colors. Emerging from the trees like shadows given form, they didn't bark. They approached. Slowly, one crawled into the hollow beside you, curling against your side. Another nudged your satchel with its nose. Duke sat right beside you, eyes fixed on your face. Warm enough? They seemed to ask. You smiled, though your lips were numb. A breath clouded the air, and in that moment, you thought maybe the cold isn't what's truly terrifying. Maybe it's the feeling that no one knows where you are, but now. They always knew. You don't know how long you drifted between sleep and consciousness. In your fevered haze, you dreamed of your old kitchen, of apple pie, of jazz playing on the radio. Then a sharp bark pulled you back. You opened your eyes. Duke stood on the rocky ledge, fur bristling, staring out toward the Valid Award, the faint outline of the old service road 10 miles away. A road no one used in winter. Then he barked. Once, twice, 3 times. Even rhythmic. Like a code, you tried to focus. Watched as one of the other dogs, a white one, like fresh snow, broke from the group and dashed into the storm, vanishing down. The path, no hesitation. No order given, just purpose. Another bark. Duke glanced at Yuan for the second time. Oh, you were certain his eyes were saying, We're not leaving you. Another dog, smaller and older, pressed closer to your back. Warmth spread through your spine. Another lay across your legs. Duke stayed alert. Watching the sky, you stared up at the snowy branches and thought of everything you'd once believed was chance. And now, between life and death, you understood it wasn't chance. You were the one who knelt in the rain. You freed Molly from that iron trap. You, knowingly, had planted a seed. And now, in the heart of a blizzard, it had grown into a pack that guarded your life with everything they had, a bark. It's one distant, but different. You held your breath. Duke's ears perked, and then without a second thought, he bolted into the trees. You didn't stop him, though your chest clenched. There was something in his eyes, a silent promise. I'll be back, with help or with hope. The others huddled, tighter, forming a living shield. One licked your hand rough, salty as melting ice. You laughed softly. Is this international rescue? You murmured. Guess I'll have to file a report. No one answered. Just the wind and the breathing of beings who couldn't write, but understood gratitude better than any human. You woke again when the world was black. Not from cold, because by then you were cocooned in warm fur. Not from pain it had dulled somehow by their presence, but because of light, a faint flicker, weaving between trees. At first, you thought it was another dream. Then you heard it voices. Hello! Anyone out here? You tried to call out, but only a hoarse groan escaped. Then loud barking erupted beside you. Duke. You hadn't heard him return, but there he was, straight and strong, barking toward the light. Another bark echoed in reply. Then another. The pack dispersed each dog in a different direction, voices echoing through the forest like a signal flare. You tried to sit up. Pain pulsed like a drum. Duke turned, licked your hand, then looked back. Just hold on moments. Later flashlight beams broke through the trees, footsteps in the snow, and then, holy hell here, there's someone here. A man in a rescue uniform appeared, panting to others behind him, faces wet with sweat despite the freezing air. We found him because this dog wouldn't stop scratching the door. Then it ran. It followed. I thought it was nuts. He trailed off, his eyes landing on you, then on Duke, still standing sentinel at your side. It's him, you smiled barely. Forest Patrol? Dog unpaid. He chuckled. One rescuer threw a blanket over you, another radioed for support, but what surprised you most was the question. These dogs? They yours? You turned. The whole pack stood on the snowy slope. Eyes calm, steady Duke. In the center, like a silent commander watching his mission end, you shook your head slowly. No, you said. I think. I belong to them. As the stretcher lifted, and your vision blurred under flashlight glare and falling snow, you saw Duke raise a pan to press it gently into the snow. One clear print. A mark of truth. They came for you, they found you, and only. Creatures with memory as deep as winter-and hearts that remember kindness could have done that. No tags, no chips, just loyalty, and a trail of gratitude carved quietly through the storm. The small mountain hospital was warm in a way only remote places could be. There were no high-tech machines, no sterile, echoing corridors. Just the scent of antiseptic mingling with pine wood, the soft glow of amber lights, and the occasional laughter of nurses who had long since grown used to life among the snow. You woke up in room 3, your leg in a cast, an IV in your arm and your chest. Weightless, not from painkillers, but because you were alive, and no one could explain how. A nurse with curly brown hair and cheeks flushed from the cold was jotting notes in the corner. She smiled as she saw your eyes flutter open. Hello. Hero, you've been out for a day and a half. You tried to ask, where are the dogs? But your throat only managed a rasp. She poured water, held it to your lips. When the rescue team got here, they said a dog had been circling the station, whining and barking for hours. Finally, someone realized it wasn't making noise. It was calling for help. You nodded faintly. A gray one. Thick coat. His name is Gook, you croaked, voice like sandpaper. The nurse blinked. Duke, huh? That's sweet. But you. frowned. But what? No one's seen him since you were found? Or the others? They just vanished, like the wind. You didn't speak. Not because you were shocked, but because you understood. They hadn't come to be owned or kept or photographed. They came to repay a debt. And when their part was done, they left, like mist retreating before the morning sun. In the days that followed, as your health steadily returned, visitors came, some strangers, some familiar. A local news station interviewed you, calling you the man saved by dogs. They asked about the pack. You only smiled and told the simple version: a rainy night, a dog at your door, a trap in the forest, and then you left it there. No embellishment. No need, because in the eyes of those who listened, the rest was already written. The world still had room for miracles. A week later, you returned to the cabin. Your leg ached, but your heart was light. You opened the door, expecting nothing. There, sitting neatly on the table, was the old glove you'd lost weeks ago, the one that vanished during a failed attempt to start a fire. It was dry, clean, its place with a familiarity that could only come from someone who knew your habits. You sat down, gazing out the window. No dogs, but the wind carried a faint bark, distant, almost like an echo from the edge of the forest. You smiled, maybe. Kindness, once given, never loses its way. It just chooses strange paths and friends who speak no words, but remember forever. Spring arrived late in the mountains. Snow melted patch by patch, revealing mossy streaks and waterlogged earth. You hobbled out to the porch, took a deep breath, for the first time since the ordeal. Everything felt truly alive again. Since being rescued, you had become unexpectedly known. Letters came in, thanking you for reminding them to believe in. Good, a few suggested writing a book, TV producers called. But you, the man who once lived alone on the edge of the map, only wanted to return to what mattered, silence that meant something. And in that silence, a quiet yearning you dared. Not named Duke, Molly, or any from that pack. But the days passed. The porch remained empty. No barks, no paw prints, no silent conversations at dawn. Instead, ... came other things. One morning, you stepped into the backyard and found a brand new pair of leather gloves placed neatly on the fence post. You hadn't bought them another day, a tidy bundle of firewood stacked by the wall, no human tracks. And one drizzly afternoon, a small fox approached, soaked, wide-eyed, and unafraid. It sat quietly watching you. You sighed and opened the door. Again, did they send you too? It didn't come in. But the next morning, you found it curled up beneath the awning, dry and still. One night, as you were lighting the fireplace, there came a soft knock. At the back door, your heart skipped. You stepped out. No one, but there, on the damp, muddy ground, a single paw print. You knelt, hand hovering over it, not daring to touch. When you looked up, the forest was still, empty, but you weren't sad because you knew, sometimes, a miracle only visits once, but its traces ripple like waves on still water. You rebuilt the fence behind the house, laid a new mat on the porch, left out a water bowl each evening, not because you expected anyone, but because even kindness needs a place to come home to, and maybe you. The man who once believed his life had long since closed its final chapter were learning to live again, taught by a pack of grateful strays. No words. No reasons. Just kindness. Slow, silent, and steady. Like winter retreating into the first drops of spring sun, a year passed. You no longer needed crutches. The injury remained only as a dull ache, a quiet reminder that you once fell and had been saved. But there was another scar unseen, still glowing warm beneath your ribs, like a coal that never went cold, and in that wooden house by the forest. Once filled only with silence, everything now felt. Listening, you hung. A small sign beside the door, welcome, whether you walk on 2 legs or 4. A friend from town, the woodcarver who ran the souvenir shop, gave it to you after reading your story in the local paper. He joked that dog should run for mayor. You just smiled, because you knew Duke didn't need a title.
Hi.
He had something no vote could grant: trust, loyalty, and a memory longer than any road you'd ever walked. Duke never returned. Molly. Neither, but sometimes while fetching water from the creek, you'd see a pack of wild dogs stop at a distance, gaze silently, and slip away. Not in fear, but as if they remembered who you were. You began to write, not for fame, not to prove anything miraculous, but to record a paw print on fresh snow. A pine branch placed on a porch. A pair of dark eyes staring at you in the rain. You titled the manuscript, The Silent Pact, because you believe this, a single act of kindness, no matter how small, it can travel farther than we ever imagine, sometimes through deep forest, over icy peaks, knocking on the hearts of those not even of our kind and returning, just in time, in forms we never expect. That day, we're clearing the backyard when you heard it rustling. You turned, just in time to glimpse a gray blur dash past. You couldn't say for sure if it was Duke, but the eyes. Those eyes you'd seen in the rain, in the snow, in the final moment before you blacked out. You smiled, sat on the porch step, and looked up at the sky clear, vast and listening. And deep inside, a thought came to you. Some things don't need thank yous, only to be remembered, and I will remember. The wind stirred softly. Above the old wooden gate, the little sign swayed gently. Welcome, whether you walk on 2 legs or 4. And if anyone ever asks what you believe in, you'll tell them about the soaking wet dog who knocked on your door one rainy night and the pack that saved your life. For one simple reason, because once you knelt and freed a paw from a trap.